Good evening, Western Civ 1. We are going to now be talking about the Eastern Roman Empire in late antiquity. Now, late antiquity, as I said, has different starting points. Some people want to put it from the reign of Diocletian. Remember him in the 280s after the military anarchy. He settled the empire back down, divided into fourths. Some people would date late antiquity from a little after 300, when Constantine the Great began his ascent. But however you started in the late 200s or early 300s, everybody would concur that the events around Constantine are important in the foundation of the Eastern Roman Empire as a separate entity from the Western Roman Empire. So, one interesting thing to keep in your minds is I said Eastern Roman Empire. And you'll remember that you can split the Roman Empire just about in half, just east of the heel of Italy. And the people west of that spoke Latin as their principal language. The people east of that spoke Greek as their principal language. So we're worried about the Greek-speaking empire now, the Eastern Roman Empire. But another thing, just to add a little confusion to the mix, historians often refer to the Eastern Roman Empire as the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine, or if you're hearing a British person, they'd say Byzantine Empire, but Byzantine or Byzantine Empire. And the reason the Eastern Roman Empire is called that is because of what Constantine the Great did. Constantine the Great built a new capital for the Eastern Roman world. Actually, for the whole Roman world, because under him, he reunited. After 323, he reunited the entire empire under just him. And his two sons managed to reign the whole empire as well before it divided up. And so he built a new capital for the Roman world. He called that city Nova Roma, New Rome. But everybody else called that capital Constantine's city. And you'll remember polis is Greek for city. Polis, P-O-L-I-S. Constantine's city is Constantinopolis. Constantinopolis in Greek. Or in English, Constantinople. Sorry, my throat. My apologies. All right. Now, Constantinople was built on the site of an earlier Greek city. That city was Byzantium. It was a trading city just off the Black Sea on the way to Greece. On the next lecture, I'll try to find a map and point all this out on a map for you. But this was a perfect location for an economic center. And there was a small trading center called Byzantium on the spot. But Constantine decided that his Roman Empire needed a brand new capital. For one thing, he's a Christian, and he wanted a capital with no pagan temples in it at all. So this new Rome, Nova Roma or Constantinople, would be built entirely as a Christian city. Churches, no pagan temples in it. And he began to tear the city of Byzantium down and on its site to build a great new capital with all the coolest stuff he could put together on short notice. And one of the ways he built beautiful buildings there was tearing up pagan temples around the Roman Empire. They ripped them to pieces, took their columns, took the marble from them, brought them to Constantinople and built official government buildings and even beautiful new Christian churches in the new capital of the Roman world, Constantinople. And Constantine dedicated his new city in 330 AD. 330 AD. He would live another 2 years after it was officially opened. And so he was the founder. He only got to enjoy it a couple of years after it was officially complete. And of course, they'll go on expanding and making it bigger and grander for 1,000 years. But Constantine died in 332 AD. a couple of years after finishing his grand opening of Constantinople. The Greek-speaking Roman Empire, or what later historians have called the Byzantine Empire, did not fall. They had Germanic barbarians coming in. Remember the Battle of Adrianople I told you about in 376? And, an Eastern Roman emperor was killed in battle against these Germans. But by and large, the Eastern Empire was able to shunt those Germans off to the west, send them packing to the west. Like the Visigoths wound up in Gaul in the west. And when these barbarians came in late antiquity, the Byzantines were able to get them out. And Constantinople itself had great walls to protect it. So even when the barbarians got close, as they did a couple of times, they could never get in the walls of Constantinople. So the Eastern Roman Empire was shaken by the barbarians' invasions, but it didn't fall. It survived. Now, Constantine had reunited the empire under just him. His two sons ruled. His nephew, Julian the Apostate, ruled. And finally, Theodosius the Great ruled in the 380s and early 390s. He was the sole ruler of the Roman world. And he, by the way, Theodosius the Great in the 380s is actually the man who outlawed paganism. It's Theodosius the Great, not Constantine the Great, as people often say, that made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. It was technically illegal to worship the pagan gods after Theodosius did this in the 380s AD. Now, there were still people in the countryside who did it. In fact, this is where the word pagan comes from. While it was illegal, and people in the cities had to stop because the cops would see them, out in the countryside, you could still build altars out in the field. You could put up a little simple wooden temple in the forest somewhere. And so country people continued to be pagans, non-Christians, polytheists, for quite a long time after Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And the Christians took to calling these country folk who worshipped the old gods or the nature gods, Pagani. That was a nickname meaning like country bumpkin or hillbilly or something like that. It was an insulting term for simple country folk that more sophisticated city folk used, Pagani. Our word pagan comes from that. So worshiping these many polytheist gods, nature gods, or gods of the Greco-Roman world, people came to call them pagans because only the country people did that by about 400 AD. Pagans, Pagani, country bumpkins. In any event, Theodosius makes it the official religion of the Roman Empire. But at his death in 395 AD, at Theodosius' great death, the empire was divided between his two sons, East and West. And from that point on, from 395 on, increasingly the Eastern and Western empires went their own way. The West would have more and more Germans invade. Remember the 410 AD, the great 400 AD, Christmas Day, 400 AD, the Germanic invasions across the frozen Rhine River I talked about, the sacking of Rome in 410. All this happens in the Western Empire, in the barbarian kingdoms of Visigoths in Spain, the Franks in what's now France, the Visigoths, and then later the Lombards in what's now Italy, and finally the Anglo-Saxons in Britannia. All those, the Vandals down in Africa, all that happened in the Western Roman Empire. None of that happened in the East. The Eastern Roman Empire continued to exist, and even in some ways kind of thrived, while the Western Empire was literally falling to pieces politically, culturally receding backwards. The Eastern Roman Empire was going on. The Greek-speaking people of the Eastern Roman Empire still considered themselves to be Romans long after the city of Rome wasn't anybody's capital. In fact, right up until 453 AD, people in what's now Turkey called themselves Romani, Romans. And even their Muslim enemies called them Rome, despite the fact the capital was actually Constantinople in what's now Turkey, not Rome, which is 1,000 miles away, they still thought of themselves as Romans. Now, the greatest of the Eastern Roman emperors, the one I want to focus on, is Justinian the Great. Justinian reigned from, let me double check my date. I think it is 528, but I want to make sure I don't tell you the wrong date. 526, my apologies. Justinian became emperor in 526 when his uncle Justin died. He was the emperor in Constantinople. And Justinian would accomplish a lot of amazing things in his long reign. He reigned over 30 years. He would build a magnificent new church in Constantinople, a brand new building, the Church of Holy Wisdom, Hagia Sophia. And we'll talk about that in the next lecture. He would rebuild the port of Constantinople, the Golden Hind, it was called. Those are the Golden Horn, and would fortify it and make Constantinople really impregnable to enemy attack. But another amazing thing he did was try to reconquer the Western Roman Empire. He was deeply disturbed that Rome and the great Latin-speaking cities of the West had been lost to the empire. He was Roman emperor. He's going to get it back. And he sent out army after army to reconquer the Western Roman Empire from the German barbarians. And in the late 530s, his general Belisarius will succeed in crushing the Vandals in Africa. He regained almost the whole of North Africa for the Roman Empire. Justinian, his general Belisarius, had a major reconquest of North Africa. Troops were also sent, and parts of Spain on the coast, the southeast coast of Spain, were regained. Troops landed in Sicily and recaptured that. Finally, they landed on the toe of Italy and moved up into Italy. Unfortunately, here the Germans were a people called the Lombards. The Lombards were fierce warriors, and there were other complications. First off, the Byzantine army, the Eastern Roman army, had to live off the land. They couldn't afford to, bring big supplies all the way from beyond Greece to Italy all the time. They had to live, as armies in the ancient world did, live off the land. And southern Italy is not terribly prosperous until you get up around Naples. But the southernmost part of Italy is very rough, dry, rocky ground, not great for agriculture. There wasn't much they could take to live on there. So the army had a tough time even feeding itself down there. They're constantly under attack by the Lombards. And worse yet, the bubonic plague broke out in Italy. So while this war is going on, they also have this terrible disease striking people down left and right. This stalled Belisarius' success. The war went on. People got killed in battle. People died of the plague. The land was stripped of everything worth having in southern Italy. But the Byzantines, the Eastern Romans, could not defeat the Lombards like they wanted. Finally, after 20 years, they managed to recapture Rome and push a little beyond it. A strip of land sort of northeast of Rome and south of that, for a time under Justinian, will once again be part of the Roman Empire. So Justinian did make Rome part of the Roman Empire and stretched up almost as far as Venice on the east coast of Italy. So southern Italy, Rome, Sicily, parts of Sardinia, parts of Spain, all of North Africa, all that was reconquered by Justinian. He was, by any standard, a great ruler and helped in large part to restore some of the glory of Rome. But it was at great cost. Southern Italy, some historians think it was modern times before southern Italy really recovered from the long war of reconquest in southern Italy. Depopulated towns, stripped lands. It took centuries for the economy of southern Italy to even come close to getting where it was before the reconquest. But still, Justinian is generally considered the greatest of the Eastern Roman emperors, certainly in late antiquity. I'll be back with art and architecture. God bless.